My name is Matt Pence, and I was in a band called Adam's Farm, and then I was in a band called the Dooms UK, and then I was in a band called Centro-matic, and then I was in a band. I might be missing a couple along the way. Then I played with Justin Townes Earl right after Centro-matic. Then I played with Sarah Jaffe. Then I played with Paul Cawthon, and now I play with Shakey Graves. Did a very brief, little shorty stint filling in for Will Johnson with Jason Isbell.
I was going to ask about that. Hi, Matt. I'm Grady Sandlin. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Nice to see you again. Welcome. Well, Shakey Graves. Tell me about that. That the most current thing?
Yeah.
What's going on?
So coming sort of into the pandemic, I had worked on, so I'm a recording engineer and a producer. I'm also a drummer. So coming into the pandemic, I had already worked on the previous Shakey Graves record called Can't Wake Up. I had recorded some stuff and some songs and some drums for songs, and then I had mixed things. So I was involved in that recording process. And also I had recorded with Alejandro Rosa Garcia is Shakey Graves. He's the creative force behind Shakey Graves. And I had also worked with Alejandro on Banquet, which is a project of the Midlake guys, most of Midlake, plus additional songwriters, formed this band called Banquet. And Ali was one of the people to do the second Banquet record. And so he came up to the studio and we worked on some music for that too. And then also I had met Alejandro when he came up with his wife, Stephanie Hunt, for El King's record, which I produced and worked on and recorded. I didn't record the entire thing, but about half of it.
Okay.
So I knew Alejandro and we had a good rapport. And so when he was making the new record, he wanted to record it at the Echo Lab and wanted me to play drums on it. Because of the pandemic and travel restrictions, he needed to have local people work on it. So instead of John Shaw playing bass, we needed to have Taylor Craft play bass, and we added Cameron Neal also, which I don't quite remember their origin. I mean, I know that they wrote songs together even before. Cameron had written the song. I think he wrote Ready or Not with Ollie leading up to the new record, and they had known each other from being in bands. I think Horse Thief opened for Shakey Graves, probably. That was Cameron's his previous band was called the Horse Thief.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So and side note, Cameron recorded at the Echo. Well, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. This is going to be a nightmare if you have to try to edit it together chronologically. But
we're just going.
Cameron recorded with JC
and me.
And you were part of the Horse Thief record too?
Yeah.
He told me that.
Yeah.
At the Echo Lab. That was the first place he ever went to record.
Well, the first place he ever came to record was my house.
You are the one that did the first record, and then the second record they did at the Echo Lab?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Cameron has told me so many good times about recording with you.
Yeah.
He was like, man, if it wasn't for Grady, I don't know where I would even be.
And he was, because he's our mutual friend, George Neal's cousin.
That's right.
Or second cousin.
Yeah.
And his mom just dropped him off. He was like 15 years old and dropped him off at my house. And, I was like, yeah, play me some songs. And we got going.
So George just said to you, oh, I've got a friend, I've got a relative, a distant, not too distant, but a relative whose son is a musician. Would you just listen to his music? They specifically
wanted to record. And so they were going to go to like the Dallas Sound Lab or something like that.
Right.
And so the idea was like, well, bring him to me. I'll at least make him a demo that he could take there.
Sure.
Or we can just and that's what we ended up doing. That was his spring break.
Yeah. Back in the days when you made demos.
Yeah. Yeah. But we had already been recording with George at my house, so he kind of knew what the capability was.
Yeah.
And that I had everything there, and that Ryan Becker was living with me, and so if I needed to pull him in. But Cameron knew all these kids, and so guys would come over and play the drums, or a guy came over and played upright bass, and another guy came over and played electric bass. And it was, I mean, I don't think I might have played some percussion on it, but I don't think I ended up really, any of my crew ended up doing much of anything on it.
So you don't think that was actually the first, that was actually the band, The Horse Thief, yet? It was just
They were
Cameron.
called Televators.
Okay.
But
was it all the same people?
Kind of. It was loose. You know, I don't know if they had really played a show yet or something, but it was loose. I don't know. And like they're kind of two bass players. It was like, oh, this guy plays on like the acoustic stuff
Not at the
and
same time.
Right. But like, yeah, this guy plays on the acoustic stuff and this guy plays on the rock stuff. And, but this drummer, Preston, they became Horse Thief. And I helped them demo some stuff before we went into, I'm a little confused on the timeline. I feel like we made a record at Echo Lab and then we did some like remote recording at his parents have a cabin in like Colorado.
Yeah.
And that was actually kind of a demo session.
In Creed,
Colorado. We went up there and I took all my gear up there and we did a demo session for what became the Horse Thief record.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm so proud of Cameron and and that, you know, now he's in a band with you. And
Yeah.
So
But Cameron also played with El King.
Right. I knew that connection was there. I figured these things
before
kind
Shakey
of
Graves. Yeah.
I kind of assumed you got him involved with Shakey, but
No, I didn't.
okay.
I didn't.
Y'all made this record. Cameron,
I mean, I knew Cameron from having made the El King records.
Okay.
Or record, not records. Record. Who, incidentally, Joey McClellan also plays with El King. Joey is the guitar player in Midlake.
And also involved in
as you well
Banquet.
know.
Was he involved in that too?
Yeah.
So y'all make that did you play drums for the Shakey Graves record that we're talking about? Okay.
Oh no, that Can't Wake Up was Chris Busada, not necessarily always playing the drums on all the album tracks, but being the drummer and playing drums on a lot of the stuff. I don't know the ratio since I only recorded some of those songs. Ali played on some of them, and Chris played on some of them. Okay. Some of it was full band tracking, you know, and then some of it was we've got the structure for the song, and we want to recut drums, want to do some different things with drums, and recut individual other things. So,
how do you come to join the band then?
So, leading up to Movie of the Week, Ali knew that he wanted to record it at the Echo Lab, wanted to record it on tape, and wanted me to engineer it, and as it turned out, help produce it. You know, and so at that time. He also, because of these restrictions of COVID, decided to just change the lineup some. So he asked Dan Creamer from the Texas Gentlemen, who at that point was already living in Austin for some years, and so they were already friends, you know. And Taylor Craft, who played in Sir Woman, and was also a good friend of Ollie's. So they had this core group of those three guys down in Austin. And then Patrick O'Connor, who has been the lead guitar player for Shakey Graves for 10 years. And Pat came out from LA and then have me play drums. Mm-hmm. And then Cameron. Then we added Cameron to the mix too. So it was the six of us to make that record. And while we were making the record then, I think Ollie probably already knew that he was interested in us being his band before he even decided to ask us to make the record. Mm-hmm. But the chemistry was really great, and we were having a great time making this record. So, he just, near the end of the recording session just said, if you guys are interested, would like for you to be the touring band that, that moves forward, for this record. So.
And you think that's sort of solidified for the future? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, we have changes. Like just now we are supporting And the War Came. So we're playing that album in its entirety for this year in our touring. Well, And the War Came is an incredibly spare record. It's actually, in some ways, it's overkill to have even 5 people playing the whole record. I think there's one song that definitely has bass on the album. There might be 2 songs that have bass. So it's a very spare record. So if we were being by the letter of the law with the album, we would barely be able to get 4 people on stage probably. Yeah. But having said that, we also, so there are the requirements of personnel are not as great for this year, or for at least for these last couple tours. Plus, Alejandro Rose Garcia and his wife Stephanie Hunt, they got married and they had a baby in March of last year. So now now Dot is able to come on tour with us, but that takes up a lot of extra space. So we've had to scale down to 5 people instead of 6 people. So that's not a permanent change. It's just while we're supporting this record. So
yeah,
that's really the only change that has happened. We've had some times where Dan has had other commitments because the Texas Gentlemen also back up Ryan Bingham. Mm-hmm. So not only did they had a lot of touring, I think it was 2022 or 2023, they had just so much touring between the Texas Gentlemen and Ryan Bingham that he could not do both bands for a chunk of time in there. So there were some tours during that time where Dan didn't play with us either. So sometimes it's 5 people, but it's usually 6 people. It's almost always 6 people.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you love it?
Oh yeah, I love it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there... is your time away from the studio, is that tough for you?
The only thing that's tough about it is that we have a routine that we do every year where we really do 2 big tours in the summer, and they're separated by a couple of weeks. But it's for all intents and purposes, it's usually 2 or 3 solid months of mostly touring, almost all touring with small breaks. That's kind of a hard time. That makes it harder personally, but it also makes it a little bit hard. If I want to book anything, every time we get to that summer chunk, I just have to be like, I'm really sorry, I can't record you for, 6 months, because I'm always booked up a few months in advance, and then you throw in all that touring and it's just really hard. And sometimes you get a really great opportunity that just falls in your lap that you just cannot do.
Yeah.
For instance, Midlake just made a new record, which, I recorded their first EP. I love Midlake so much. I'm in bands with them and have helped them make many records. I mixed The Courage of Others, blah, 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 blah. They're so close. I love them so much, and the feeling's mutual. And they recorded the new record at the Echo Lab, but I could not be there because I was on tour, and the tour was, it was not, if it had been well in advance, we could have figured out how to I could just say to the band, yeah, I can't do this, but that train had already left the station.
Yeah.
So, Charlie Wiles engineered that, and Sam, oh, fuck me. See, I almost thought before I came in, you need to make notes and write down a list of people. Sam. Anyway. Fuck. This is going to be so bad. I'm going to have to stop doing this because I'm stalling so hardcore. You're going to have to edit. But it's so embarrassing to me. This is just a side note for you guys. It's so embarrassing to me to forget people's names and to forget names of, obviously, albums that I've worked on. I just have and I always have had this. I have a very, very slippery memory. It's really bad. And so it's just so embarrassing, to forget, especially because your identity is so tied in with your name, of course. And in a million years, I would never want somebody to think that they were forgettable.
Right. We had Paul Slavens in here, and he had a band member, a drummer that he'd play with, and he was like, I'm just spacing on the guy's name. And it's someone who I'm close with, but I did not know he played in 10 Hands.
Right.
So I could have fed him the name if I had known.
Right.
But it was so we figured it out later. Let's just rewind then.
Okay.
I want to know how you got into this. How did you end up in Denton? I know because you're from Missouri.
St. Louis. I'm from outside of St. Louis, about an hour west of St. Louis, a little town called New Melle, Missouri. So it's population 168 people.
Wow.
Yeah. But luckily, in Missouri, they have consolidated schools. So if you are from a little tiny town, you can still go to school in a regular size high school. They just bus you from all over the country to just get you there. So it was like an hour bus ride every day to get to school and an hour bus ride back home. But it was totally worth it because I got to be in a real high school that was like 1,500 kids or whatever. So, I got to do band, marching band, and concert band. I got to wrestle. I just got to do all these normal things. And there were so many kids in the school that I could find my people.
Yeah.
My wife, on the other hand, she grew up in Aubrey, Texas. Her graduating class was 36 people. So I don't know how many, she probably had 200 kids or less than 200 kids, 150 kids in the school, maybe tops. Mm-hmm. And she just, felt like an outcast her whole time in school. And it ended up creating more distance between herself and society. And it just was hard on her. It's nothing tragic. It's just the difference between having an opportunity to flourish in, an environment and not.
Yeah.
And it really helped me. I mean, maybe this is just natural to me anyway, but it was just very good for me to be able to figure out how to fit in with a bunch of different groups of people and to just learn in your life, not much changes in reality from what it's like to be in high school. Mm-hmm. Like in our artistic community in Denton, there's still hierarchy. There's still status. I mean, all of life is about your status. And status is not just about having the most money. A lot of status is having respect, and being respected by your community. That's really what I care about. That's the most important status symbol for me. And so it was really important for me to figure out how to earn status within a group of people. It really helped me.
And, I feel like you have that as a musician. You're respected by other musicians. Is that something you consciously tried to cultivate?
I think I consciously tried to be liked. I'm just a human being who wants to be liked.
Sure.
And I just naturally like other people. So at first it wasn't like, well, no, it was totally conscious. Let me back up to say this. When I was just learning how to play drums, I started learning to play drums when I was 10. All I cared about from the time that I got, my first drum set was being on the cover of Modern Drummer magazine. And what is a bigger status symbol to me at the time than that?
Yeah.
So I knew, and I wanted to be in a rock band right away. I mean, those are all status things. I mean, if you don't care about status, you don't care if anybody ever hears your music.
Right.
So the idea that, we're not looking for reinforcement or validation from outside sources is absurd. Of course we all are. Mm-hmm. I mean, not all of us. There are, people that are super outliers that don't think of that. And there have been, amazing examples of people that didn't think that their art would be accepted, so they never tried. And then they passed away, and then their grandchildren discover these amazing works of art or these amazing writings, and then they become famous after the fact or something. But, for the most part, we do care about status,
So if you're practicing then, working on it, you're like, if I kick a lot of ass, someone's going to notice.
Yeah.
And it's going to lead to something. And you said you're an athlete too. I think that those work together when you're a kid,
For sure. Well, part of that too, being an athlete, part of that was just trying to fit in, figuring out where did I belong. And though I'm not directly competitive, like I'm not a person that wants anybody to lose. This is part of me. Like I'm a person who wants to be liked, and I just naturally like other people a lot. I just, I don't like conflict, but I do like to excel. So I love to take tests, and I love to test myself. So sports were really fun for that reason. It was like really fun to see what I could achieve. And maybe some of that was status, or it was really just trying to fit in. But I don't like to see other people lose. Mm-hmm. It's not fun for me to watch somebody with their heart broken. That's just, right. I would rather play a game where I can excel, but somehow I don't have to take it away from somebody else.
Well, that's music.
Yes, you're right. You're totally right.
And if you're there totally at the sporting event and you're in the marching band, you're like,
yes.
Well, let's stop annihilating each other for 15 minutes and let's have some music.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Get everybody out here, and we'll get everybody kind of in a nice mood, and then we'll go back to the war on the field.
Yeah.
Did you you talked about finding your people. Who were those in high school? Were you like, what kind of kid were you?
Definitely band nerds. 100%, no doubt. Just nerds in general. I am a nerd. I'm just somebody who enjoys being a nerd. I just like facts. I'm like detail oriented in a very certain way. I'm not detail oriented in some ways, but I am in others. And so, yeah, just being right is very important to me. I really like that there are answers, and I like to find out what they are and have them.
Yeah.
So it's basically almost any nerd I could get down with. But I also was accepted by, like stoners and other groups. I mean, athletes accepted me okay. I wasn't like, I wasn't a big jock, but I got along well with those people, And like I said, partially because, well, a couple things. Partially because I like other people and I find what they have to offer. I'm able to find that. Mm-hmm. But also because when I observe somebody, I think I am able to, I'm interested enough to ask questions to find out that they're more complex than just the stereotype that's presented.
Right.
So I could see the nerdiness in an athlete. I could tell. I would remember that Tom Tillman also was good. He wasn't good in math, but that he was good in math. And so we would, he was like a star football player, and we would arm wrestle, and that would be really fun. But then I would also remember that he was a nerd in this one particular way.
Yeah.
Even Future Farmers of America, which is what we had in. Those people are totally nerdy about what they are doing.
Right.
They know so much about agriculture and about raising livestock, and they will just talk your ear off about the best fertilizer for corn for this.
There's something like when you have an organization though, or you have a team, you have an easy way. You have a jacket you can put on. There's a different kind of nerdiness where there's not necessarily a signifier, a jacket you can wear.
That's right.
And you seek out those people. And that's what, for, playing in bands and stuff, that's what it was. Yeah. Was like, are you a nerd about this? Do you know about these records? Mm-hmm. Do you...
For sure.
I don't know. Can you play the guitar well? Or do you have a place where we can practice?
Yeah.
So, like, was there some of that going on? Did you, within the band nerds, were you guys creating music?
Yeah, I do have a radar for coolness, even though I wasn't uncool, but I wasn't the coolest person in school. Mm-hmm. But I just had I could recognize it. So when I would view a certain musician and understand what was compelling and charismatic about them, I started to mine that for myself. And so I started to try to pick out the other people in band class that had that characteristic, because I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to be, successful, and I knew, I wanted to start my own band someday. Mm-hmm. So I was identifying that and figuring that out at an early age. And that's really, and then to kind of figure out, you compare that to what it's like, what you are like, and you figure out what's the distance between what I am and what I want to be, and then you can cultivate that throughout your life. So when I was young, I wasn't naturally the coolest person or the most stylish person, but I just kept measuring it and figuring it out, and I figured out, slowly but surely over the course of my life, what works for me and how can I fit in with these people. So finding how to be in a rock band within my band, my concert band or my marching band, was a big part of that. It's amazing when you look back, you can see how you were doing what you needed to do to get where you wanted to be so early on. Mm-hmm. I was ambitious from a very early age.
Sure.
And I knew it, and that was a kind of ambition that I was proud of. And I took pride that my parents noticed it and were proud of me for that,
Yeah.
So I really took that and ran with it. And I literally, there might be other reasons for this too, but I was careful not to fall in love too heavily in high school, not to be too attached to St. Louis. to that area because I knew that I was not going to live there. I knew that St. Louis was not a sustainable place for me, that I had bigger ambitions in the world than to live, or let's just say New Melle. It's a little bit unfair to say it about St. Louis, but just in general, I knew that I wanted to be either at Berkeley or at UNT. I didn't even want to go to, there was a really good music school, SIUE at Edwardsville. No, is that the one? Anyway, SIUE, yeah. Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. They had a great music program, but it was too close to home. I wanted to get away, to get out of St. Charles. I didn't want to get sucked into the gravity of being in that small town because I knew that it would push me away. It wouldn't help me to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
So you came to UNT?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I visited Berkeley in Boston, and I visited UNT, and I just really preferred UNT. Plus, Matt Chamberlain was playing in the Rock Bottom Lounge. He wasn't a student, but he had recently gone to school here, and he was mind-blowing. He was so transcendent. What an incredible drummer.
Yeah.
And also, the guy that was playing in the 2 o'clock at that time was he was a sophomore playing in the 2 o'clock. This guy was so incredible. And I was just like, if this school can do that for these two people, I've got to come here. There was nothing I saw at Berkeley that was impressive in the same way,
And so you came down, did you start as jazz studies major?
Yeah, my first year I did start as jazz studies major. My first year I got an academic scholarship. Ironic that I would say academic scholarship when talking about having an academic scholarship. My first year, so that gave me in-state tuition, which is hugely affordable. Like that was such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And then my second year, I got a drum set scholarship, and I was in a lab band my first year and everything. I was like,
really?
Yeah, I was like the freshman that made the 9 o'clock lab band. It was like not a high lab band, but still just to make a lab band was very impressive and gave me huge validation to come to this school from New Melle, Missouri, and be able to be a standout in my class was huge for me.
Sure.
Huge for me. But then as I was exposed to punk rock music and artists in general, and as like the grunge rock movement developed, I was just blown away by people who didn't even know how to play an instrument standing up on stage and doing something really interesting. So one example is John Freeman. So John would just tune his guitar to an open chord, and he would just put his index finger on the neck and just move it up and down to make whatever, to create a song.
Yeah.
And then he would just write a million songs, and just the most freely creative person I've ever been around, like mind-blowingly creative. And hugely funny and very entertaining. That's all important. But he was not concerned with the trappings of learning how to make music or of being right about it. And that was, like I said earlier, I'm a nerd and I like to be right about things. It was really important for me to get exposed to somebody who didn't care about being right in that way, that didn't need the validation of other people saying he was correct in order to pursue it.
Maybe a bit of a, I don't want to know it.
Oh, he definitely didn't want to know.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And especially in this town or in Denton, it's where there are people who do want to be the best and who do want to study and who do want to know everything.
Especially because I was going to school for it.
Yeah.
So like everybody at school, that's what it's, the status at school was, obviously doing well, but being able to just memorize all these standards, being able to play any style, just all those things. And I just felt myself drifting away from that more and more. And as I learned about punk rock music and got exposed to more free expression, I started to identify something, which was that the musicians that I loved at UNT, I didn't love them because they were excellent technically. I loved them because they were excellent creatively. And I wanted to figure out, how do I inhabit that space? How do I become creative? So I had taken drum lessons my whole life up until that moment. From the time I started until I was still taking drum lessons because I was in school for drums, And so I noticed that I had sort of taken shortcuts the entire time. It was always somebody else telling me how to get a little further along a little faster, because I was on the fast track. I was ambitious and I cared about getting there. And I saw these, not only in the art community and the punk rock community, these raw talents that didn't seek out that kind. They just explored the instrument on their own. But I also saw, even in the people that were schooled, what I was valuing in their playing was the creativity and not the technique. And so I really decided, okay, I'm at a disadvantage creatively. I don't even know who I am musically. I have nothing to say. I'm just regurgitating other things. I'm just cobbling together things that are already in the vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And so this was in my freshman year. I mean, I recognized this pretty fast, but I made my drum set very low. I made it a 4-piece drum set, because before this, I was playing a bunch of different voices. It was like splash cymbals that were just China. It was like a bunch of different sounds all the time. Mm-hmm. Because I loved, the Police and, the Sugar Cubes and all these other, kind of this music that, and also like Terry Bozzio or whatever, mm-hmm. and, all that kind of stuff. So I just simplified everything. And I started. I made my rack tom be really flat. I went to one cymbal and a pair of hi-hats. That was the only cymbals on my rig, and it was a 4-piece drum set. And then I started playing all my drum fills with just one hand. I started moving my other hand down to the side when I would do a fill, because the idea was, I really want to play the most interesting, memorable fill I could possibly play. And right now, what I'm doing is just locomoting and just moving the different, each subdivision, I'm just moving that to a different voice, which is very common for a more complicated drumming style. Mm-hmm. But it was just like, I'm not saying anything. And I was noticing my favorite drummers, Phil Collins, Ringo Starr, drummers like that they would play the most interesting but memorable fills, and I wanted to figure out how to do that. So I just really broke my playing down and started over, and I started listening to other music that was just more rudimentary, but that had this charisma to it. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I also just drifted away from school. So I only went to school another year after that. I did I think I got into my third year of school, like I signed up for the first semester, and I don't know even how much of it I actually completed. I was just ready to wash out at that point and just didn't want to disappoint people too much. I think I actually might have stopped going to school during my second year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I got this drum set scholarship and was really validated by UNT, and then I basically didn't follow through on my own. I then rejected that whole life, which I've always regretted, but I don't regret rejecting it. I just have always been unhappy with how that worked out, because I felt like they had placed some
value.
Yeah, some value, and they had validated me. And what was right for me at that time was just to pursue these other things. So that was right around the time that the Dooms UK was forming. I was already in this band, Adam's Farm, and I was just so taken with this, Mm-hmm. The Beastie Boys had already put out Paul's Boutique, which was incredibly influential to me.
Yeah.
And in my sophomore year, Check Your Head came out. It was just,
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I never think of. I'm a big fan of the. Oh my God! What, like Sgt. Pepper would be an example, or there's a riot going on. There's a name for it. It's the album where you kind of take on a different persona, and I'm doing the thing now.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know what the phrase is.
Paul's Boutique would be like.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know many people who've done it on their second album.
Oh, I think a lot of bands do it on the second album. What do you think Pinkerton is?
Yeah, okay.
I can tell you this: it's the best Weezer record by far. Yeah. I know people will say that the Blue Album is the best. Pinkerton is incredible to me.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
And something could be said about the bends in that way too, even though, you take a bigger step with OK Computer. But maybe you're right. Maybe that is always by default the...
I think it's natural because you've spent your career making that first record, and then you realize, obviously there's sophomore slump. So a lot of people think that, the second record is not a great record, but I view that second record for most bands, or many bands, as being the place where they realize how they want to be different and then try to achieve it.
Yeah. Okay, so when did Adam's Farm happen?
So I came to school in the fall of 1990. I saw Adam's Farm also play in the Rock Bottom Lounge that winter, right before Christmas break. I walked up to Jeff after or maybe it was between sets, and basically said, "Man, I really love your band, but I really think I could do a better job than your drummer." I said it more tastefully than that. Not very tasteful, though. Ultimately, like, I would never do that now. I would never say that now. And I would never, like, have the hubris to kind of, it was a very naive thing to say in many ways. Also, let me say that drummer, whose first name is Will, I can't remember his last name, but was a great drummer. He was totally in the Bill Berry tradition of drumming, if we can get a little bit nerdy about that stuff. So it was like pattern oriented, not technically, I mean, not smooth and super proficient, but kind of blocky, but very pattern oriented and very cool, very cool. I actually love this guy's drumming. And of course, as soon as I started playing these songs, because then Will ended up quitting the band the next semester. So then in the spring following that, we went home for Christmas break. And then in the spring following that, Will quit the band and I joined the band. So it was really good that I said something to Jeff. Yeah. Jeff Whittington was the person whose music it was.
Was Mark already in the band?
Singer, yeah, the singer-songwriter. Okay. Yeah, so Mark Hedman was the bass player. Steve Stallings played guitar. And that we were a four-piece when I first joined. Okay. And it was kind of a folk rock band. And so then Jeff called me and said, "Well, I know you're interested in being the band, and our drummer just happened to quit. So let's see what happens. Let's see what you're like. Basically, let's make some music together and see if this is good. This can work." So it worked out great, but it was super rude the way it just. I mean, I didn't do it in a rude way, but it was rude to do that.
That's just like being young. I listened to some Adam's Farm on the way here because that was my intro to you. Mm-hmm. And that was like Brian, my producer, who's in the room with us, everybody.
Hey, Brian.
If you can picture that, is like we were fans. We were instant fans upon seeing you guys. And you were a part of the draw of that. And I saw Dooms UK and totally did not get it.
Right.
And so Adam's Farm like spoke so much to us. We're probably 13 or 14 years old.
Yep.
And up close, and the songs were raw. And then you had this very explosive drumming.
Right.
Mark also kind of a hyperactive bass player.
Right.
And to listen to it today, I'm hearing Jeff, and like he's got a very. Jeff sounds very like I wrote some things down, and that was good. That was enough. And you guys are filling it all in is kind of what it sounds like. And you can tell when you're young, you're trying to show everybody everything you can.
Exactly.
And so that's why now you might walk up to someone in
the space
and be friendly and go, I play. You might kind of introduce that idea, but when you're young, you go, hey, I really like your band. I would love to play your music or whatever.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
You kind of, and that's what you guys were doing musically is what I was hearing today was like, I can tell that's Matt, but I know what you sound like now.
Right.
And I mean, it was so explosive at the time and we loved that. That was like if you were playing how you played now and we saw it, we probably would have been like, that was cool, and we might have moved on.
Yep, that's right.
So
let me say a couple of quick things. One of them is I think the way that Jeff, one of the cool things about that, it was a three-piece at the time that you saw us. I would almost guarantee that you saw us at a time when we were the most influenced by Dinosaur Jr. and other grunge music, and it was very heavy. We were very heavy forever after that. When I first joined the band, it was a total folk rock band. I'm saying it was like Django rock, Django college rock, like not what it was a lot more like REM when we first joined.
That's still kind of the touchstone I was hearing today, songwriting wise.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jeff is a folk writer. One of the things I love so much about Jeff's playing is that he writes all of his melodies within his chord structure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just
very folky.
Such a good guitar player. He would do all of this cool, melodic stuff within his chords. And then that was always interesting when it was clean. And then when we got heavy, he was still doing it. It was very compelling and very cool.
Yeah.
So it made sense for us to be a three-piece because, like I said, I'm being bombastic and playing a million things. Mark is also basically the other guitar player in the band that just happens to be playing a bass.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. He's playing chords and he's just doing a lot of stuff. So it was really perfect that we scaled it down to just three people. It worked out really cool.
And I had Brent in here, and we talked about him. I kind of wonder.
Did you guys talk that he was in Adam's Farm?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
Okay.
of course. Yeah. And I sort of wonder, because this was at the Bomb Factory. So I saw a show at Artist Square that got rained out, and I think that's where I saw Dooms UK. Was like where they have put 2 stages downtown and kind of have them, ping-ponging or whatever. And I think that's where I saw Dooms for the first time. And I could tell it was like, I was like acid or something, like the musical acid trip kind of thing.
For sure.
And I think we were at this thing at the Bomb Factory that might have been sort of the same idea where they had a small stage in the back and a big stage in the front.
Right.
Whatever was going on in the front, we weren't interested in. And so we were right up next to the stage when you guys start and everyone all of a sudden is behind us and we're up close. And that's, I was like, I remember boots and guitars and the drummer, and it was like, I remember being like that, nerdy guy, crazy on the drums, and like we kind of follow you guys around. After that, and like we got into the records and all that, and then I think at some point I just lose track of it, and then I hear we also liked Funland, and then I hear, oh, the drummer of Funland is starting a band, and the rhythm section of Adam's Farm is in that, and that was like, my mind was blown. It's like someone said, Keith Moon writes songs and John Bonham is going to play drums. Like, what in the hell are you saying?
Yeah.
So that like, and weirdly, I think, when I first heard Centro-matic, I wasn't immediately blown away. I think it was probably Redo the Stacks, and like the lo-fi quality thing just did not grab me at first, and it took me like really getting to Will's songs that that really where it took off. I want to talk about recording. Did you record Adam's Farm?
I ended up recording. Yes, I recorded one EP, or maybe it was the full. Maybe it's this Rock Music Machine. Maybe it is that album that I recorded. I recorded one release of ours.
How did that happen? How did you get into recording?
Yeah.
As well? Is this your tie to being creative?
Well, it's just very simply that when you are a drummer and you're going to a recording studio, the drums are the thing of all of them that are created by the recording engineer / producer the most. They're defined by the recording process the most. And so I found it very unsatisfying to not be able to achieve what I wanted to achieve sonically. And it wasn't that I wanted it to sound better. It was what you just said. It's about it being lo-fi. I was really, because I have been recorded by some really great engineers, and they have done a great job of capturing the drums, but I wasn't looking for my drums to be captured. I wanted my drums to be reinvented. I wanted an explosive drum sound. I wanted to the feeling that you have when you're in, when you're playing the drums, but especially if you're in a crowded rock club, especially if it's made out of concrete and people are just jammed in there, that I wanted that feeling to be conveyed to the listener. And it just was never going to happen by a series of close mics that are almost perfectly, wrangled. And I just couldn't no matter how much I would suggest or talk to the recording engineer about that in any situation, I just was not, it was just not what I wanted. And so I started just experimenting on my own, having a Tascam 424. So I just started messing around with it. And this is way back, even I had my Tascam when the Dooms UK in my sophomore year of college. I lived in a house with Ian Bjornstad, who was from the Dooms UK also, and we would do lots of 4-track recording projects just using a Radio Shack PZM was my microphone. And so, I have listened to those recordings having become a real recording engineer, and I'm still impressed and very happy with the recordings made just in a bedroom with a PZM, because what we did was we would just listen back to what it sounded like, then we would change either how we played or where the microphone was located or whatever so that we could get better results. We just experimented to make it better. And a lot of times what happens in a recording studio is you go in, they have their setup that's just kind of relatively predetermined. And if you don't happen to like that, you don't have time most of the time to experiment, to get the thing that's in your mind. And you very often don't get a recording engineer or a producer that wants to explore enough to have satisfied me at that time. Also, to say this, it could have been that I could have run into like some, unbelievable situation where the person did such an amazing job that I would have been won over to recording more cleanly. But at the time, I wanted it to be lo-fi because I couldn't figure out any other way to translate what I wanted my drums to sound like.
Yeah. So, like, aesthetics is something I that comes to mind with you, and like we've talked about this before. It is about making choices and saying, well, I don't. And there's always, I think everyone has this line of like, this is cool, that's not cool, or whatever. And we all make those choices consciously or not.
Yeah.
And there's something, I guess, obviously with Centro-matic, I think you and Will coming together in this way was like, I have these songs, you want to play drums, but also you understand his vision.
Yeah.
What happened there? Like, how did that, were you just going to work on the record?
Yeah.
Okay. Redo the stacks. You were just going to record it.
Yeah. So Will and I knew each other he was in a band called Funland and I was playing in Adams Farm at that time. And, he also played in Baboon. Will did. He was the drummer in Baboon.
Okay.
The first drummer in Baboon. So there was even a time when he couldn't make a Baboon gig because there was another Funland gig, and I filled in for him in Baboon. So we were friends and we admired each other's drumming very much, and basically Adams Farm and Funland were like peers, and we loved each other's bands. So, and then when I started doing 4-tracks, I started, doing a little bit more 4-tracking, and Will was also doing some 4-tracking. So he knew that I was doing that. I, however, being such a nerd, I couldn't help myself. I couldn't stop at a 4-track. So I got an 8-track half-inch machine and started using that to record in my next house that I lived in. And Will came over as he was starting to make Centro-matic music, which was him playing everything. He came over and recorded this song that I'm still very proud of called Court Date. And Will plays all the instruments, and it was a very Wilco-esque song, or just kind of acoustic rock, kind of song. Really cool. And I recorded him doing that on my 8-track, and it almost turned out too good. Like, I think on some level, Will didn't necessarily even, I'm putting words in his mouth. He's never told me this, but I think he was even looking for something more lo-fi than what we did there. But I knew that I loved Will's music. I was hearing Centro-matic songs already by recording that song. And then we already had a great rapport. Like, we were already getting along great. So I then moved to Boston because my wife, she got accepted at Harvard Law School, and there's no way in the world I was going to ask her, to do anything other than to pursue her dreams. So I was like, I'm going to, you go first. I'm going to visit you a lot. And then in your second year at law school, I'll come up and we'll finish law school together. So Will and I are forging this relationship during her first year of law school. And then I'm living in Boston when Funland resolves and Will is ready to record a Centro-matic, or he sent me a letter saying, I think I'm interested in recording. Would you be interested in recording me doing this album or this music? And I already knew I wanted to be the drummer in Centro-matic. It was like not even close. I loved Will's songs right away from even before I moved to Boston. But I also knew that I needed to move back to Texas in order to make sure that I was the person who would get to play that I would get to be a member of the band. So it just happened to work out that Julie decided to do her third year of law school at Berkeley. That was the perfect reason for me to jet back and start living back in Texas and record the first Centro-matic record, which is what I did. So I recorded Redo the Stacks. Will plays all the instruments on it, and except for cello and fiddle, Scott Dambaum played the fiddle, and Lindsay, can't remember her last name, played, ooh man, Will would remember it, played cello. So that was, I knew I was very into lo-fi music, and I knew Will was too, and he never said it, but I felt that what we did with that song Court Date was probably too clean for Will. You know, that he wanted something gnarlier than that.
Did it get released?
I doubt it.
Okay.
It's a great song.
When can we hear it?
It needs to get put out. It's so good.
Find that reel.
It's so good.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's so good. Because my original, at that time in my life, what I wanted, well, let's finish this thing first. So I recorded this album in a house I lived in that Matt Barnhart also must have lived there, or he was just coming over to hang out. But while I was making Redo the Stacks, I also met Matt Barnhart, who I would subsequently start the Echo Lab along with Dave Willingham. Mm-hmm. So I make that record. I rented a very expensive microphone from Terry Slemons, and we basically recorded that album with one microphone. You know,
what was the microphone?
It was,
for the nerds out there,
it was a Sony C12, and which is like it's like basically the design is like a 251.
Okay.
You know, but it's the Sony version. It was a large diaphragm tube condenser, you know, and amazing microphone. Really not necessarily the best choice to do what we were trying to do, but because it was almost too pretty and too perfect, but we definitely made it work. In fact, that album is so crazy because I have always had this thing for using whatever's at my disposal. I'm not a purist at all, so I'll use any format that's available to me. Because we were using so few microphones, kind of out of necessity, when we got into like working on some of the songs, it was just like, look, I can't even talking about drums now. I mean, there's so much cymbal happening. Will also was the same, you know, kind of drummer I was at that time, like very loud cymbals, very heavy, loud cymbals to begin with, and then banging on like crazy. So you really like you could barely hear the kick drum and the snare drum a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So I figured out how to. It's not like all these drums were recorded with only one mic, but I'm saying it might have been 2 or 3 mics tops, but you know. It was not working quite well enough. And so my roommate at the time, James Henderson, also in the Dooms UK, had a Kawai sampling keyboard. I got a trigger device that would pick up an audio signal and then send out a MIDI note. We sampled the drums we were recording and had them come back up on his keyboard, and then that triggering device would trigger from the tape to do sample replacement.
Okay.
So I actually, even back then, I'm slaving an 8-track half-inch machine to an ADAT, and I'm also using this crazy sample replacement technology that's so rudimentary to then sample replace to reinforce the sound of the kick and the snare, because it was just so wild sounding, so unfocused.
Interesting.
That, you know, it's still unfocused when you listen to it, but you know, it's really, I was just determined to try to create the thing in my head, and I wanted something that sounded really lo-fi, but that also, you know, conveyed the music and just had a depth to it that I couldn't quite get from a pure lo-fi approach, you know? So,
yeah. You like interrupted yourself with something else that maybe you were going to get back to in that. We'll continue moving. Do y'all start playing shows?
Yeah. While we were making that record, Will and I are, you know, he's like, I don't remember how he said it, but basically it was like, we're gonna do this band together, you know, and we start planning what we're gonna do. And the first idea was like, okay, let's just do a rotation. It'll be you, me, we'll play every show, but we'll just have other people join us differently every week. It's just going to be very free. Let's just not get mired down in it being like just the same lineup. And then we asked Scott Danbaum Scott might have played the first show with us, and then we added Mark Hedman for the second show, and it's been the exact same membership without a single change.
Yeah, we've not cycled people in and out.
We were not able to successfully cycle a single person out of the band, which is like a dream come true to find these four people that want to basically spend the rest of their lives together making music. Whether that's their main thing together or not, we just knew that the chemistry was really great.
And so I think Centro-matic did well around here. I know it's gotten a lot of respect from other songwriters and a lot of your peers. I love it when people bring it up, because when people bring it up outside of like just our local community, but they make a very serious thing to say, this is really special to me. This music was, really had an impact on me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. I will listen to Centro-matic testimonials all day because I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And but it seems to have never really caught on in the way that I think you guys probably wanted it to.
Yeah.
And I know Will had been through some, there's some like bad experiences with label stuff, and that seems to be kind of prevalent in the writing of the very early stuff. You can see that there's some like bitterness there.
There's a song called "All Hail the Label Scouts."
Yes, exactly. So. Yeah. And I need to get him in here to really speak to that. But I feel like from my generation, there was never any hope of that. Mm-hmm. There was by the time we got our own, we're trying to do things with our 4-track and our 8-track and build our home studio thing. It was almost just a conclusion that it was never really going to go where we thought it was, when we were first having that dream of a validation. Mm-hmm. And so there was that in a way is freeing to be like, well, we'll just, we can make something of ourselves around here, and maybe we can open for a cool band, or our friends will like it and people will come and see us play or something like that.
Or we will just be a band that does like living room tour. Not that we didn't have living room tours when we were first doing it, but just that exists on a small level, that just exists on a club level, and never has an expectation that we're gonna we're just gonna have a smaller pool of people that love us.
And was that you guys too?
Yeah.
There was some just knowledge of that was it. It never, like the heights were never huge.
So there is a thing that has changed in culture that's important to be reminded of, that the grunge rock movement, punk rock really, but grunge music also typified this, that it was not, there was a whole thing of selling out, that you were not supposed to change your music or be influenced by anything other than art. Art was the only thing that you were supposed to be beholden to. Mm-hmm. So being on a major label in itself was actually had a cost among your peers. If we want to go back to the status game of we cared very much about our status as pure musicians, people that weren't being told what to do, that were just making the music we wanted to make. And that was important to us. So the song All Hail the Label Scouts, it's about that. I mean, it's about his experience of being on the wrong side of, or not fully, of the major label experience not fully working out. But it's not Will is not a bitter person about that at all. It's just that experience allowed him to realize that wasn't necessarily the path that he wanted to take. Mm-hmm. So Centro-matic was about sticking to just trying to make the music we wanted to make, and not to be influenced by guessing what other people want. It's a real problem to make your art based on what you think other people want to hear, and we were just not interested in doing that. We were young enough to not care about that, to know that was dangerous, is what I should say. To know that it was dangerous to care about what other people think of your music as you're writing it. So it was also just a cultural thing that you were lame and lesser if you let that happen. So it was important to have some integrity, you know? Mm-hmm. And that is something that nowadays, I'm not saying that there's no integrity in music, but I'm saying there's no concern about allowing your music to be used in a commercial. There's no concern about being associated with art that's not great. I mean, of course, there's a little bit of a concern if a TV show asks you to use their song and you know it's a lame TV show, but it is minor. If you did that now, people wouldn't really begrudge you.
Right.
Back then, you really you would fall down a step on the ladder of the ladder of what am I trying to say, of your peers, you know, like the status ladder, if you were in something lame or if you were, you know, judged to be selling out, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And then you kind of continue recording, like it feels like everything really starts happening because you guys kind of coalesce as a band. I think Will's songwriting, there's a noticeable, I don't know. I mean, it was always good, but like he's getting better as a songwriter, you're getting better as an engineer, and there is a really great string of records with Centro-matic where it feels like everybody is kind of in lockstep together.
Yeah.
The production perfectly matches the songwriting and the music, and everything really is like happening. Y'all 20 years? Did y'all do it that long? Was it?
It was, I think, 16 or 17 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, like, what causes it to?
Well,
to
we
like
could count it. It was we started making that record in the fall or the winter of 1996.
Okay.
And Redo the Stacks was put out in 97. But if we said it was 96, and then we finished our last tour in the fall of 2014.
Okay, 18 years. Is that right? Do you have a good, like, what do you tell people when they ask why Centro-matic broke up?
Oh, it was just because at some point it just was, even though we had toured the world and had lots of respect and had a great group of people that loved us, we were for sure a cult. It was a cult following. Mm-hmm. And you just have other things in your life. You know, you can only justify spending that much of your time for that amount of gain for so long before, you know, you're just passing up too many other things in your life in order to make time for this. And a lot of that is just pure personal time. It's not that you're passing up necessarily other opportunities to be more successful professionally. It's just that, you know, as you start to have more, as you get older in life, you just have more stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, literally, you're more beholden to your family. You might have a family, which you didn't have when the band first started. Right. You know, that kind of stuff.
And then, whatever. I mean, kind of more recently, because you do have peers. You have people like Jason Isbell, who's like, I want you guys to play.
Yeah.
You know, would that take much doing? And it seems like you guys are like, no. We would absolutely do it. Like
it doesn't take nothing, but it has to be a very special occasion. So we also sometimes get asked to play just individual shows, and it's just much harder to work that out. And there are very good reasons to play individual shows, and sometimes we have actually tried to play a lot more than people might think, like individual shows than people might think. But it's just the 4 calendars are just very hard to get together.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there will be a benefit we really, really, really want to play, and we have tried to do that, and we can't. You know, we've had trouble making it work. So,
yeah.
But we've always loved making music. We always knew we would make more music together. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that we will make more music together. I'm sure that we will make another record of some kind, whether it's South San Gabriel or Centro-matic or whatever it is. We have always loved each other and never intended to stop making art together. You know, we just knew that we were going to stop making it the first priority of our professional lives, you know. And part of it, to be really honest, I mean, it was important for us to say to people that we're putting this down, that, you know, to have a farewell tour and say we're not going to be doing this. It was important for us to do that instead of just slowing down or just stopping. Mm-hmm. We wanted it to be a thing where people understood this was an opportunity you're only going to have for a little while to experience this. So,
come and catch it. Let's say goodbye.
Let's all do this together
see you
a little
later.
bit. Yeah, it was definitely really fun and important for us to do that.
Cool. It was, I like the way you guys did it. I like the way you guys did everything. So
thanks.
And then, and I think it's getting that, being able to like come back to it and it's really great. I've caught it at Dan's a couple times, but it's really nice because I'll be walking up to Dan's and see someone getting out of their car, mm-hmm. and I'm like, here we are.
Yeah.
It's the same people. It's that I see those people at other shows, but I know they're going to be here mm-hmm. when you guys decide to do it again. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
a testament to you guys for sure.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I will say just something about making more obscure music or whatever music is honestly intended for a smaller audience. That's really the truth of it. Mm-hmm. We did not make music that was intended for the broadest audience. Obviously, Centro-matic music is extremely accessible. We're not making, ambient. We're not making a Philip Glass record here. It's pop music and it's accessible. But you really are focusing and you're reaching out to a specific kind of person. You're narrowing the focus. But it's unbelievable how we could be in Holland or someplace halfway around the world, and people will come up and you can just tell the people that like our music are already our friends. Mm-hmm. And that's partially because they've listened to our music and like us, but it's unbelievable how much they're already in the tribe, because there's something about music that there's all this information in music that you can't crunch those numbers with your conscious brain. You just know something about a band without being able to articulate why is it that this one band that for all intents and purposes sounds just like another band, why do you love this one so much more than this other one? And why are you drawn to them? Drawn so much that when they come to town, you make sure you see this band and you don't really care that much about seeing this band. There's just all of these things that I think our conscious minds cannot perceive that get thrown out into the ether through music. Yeah. And people halfway around the world heard those things and picked up on them and made sure that they were there when we came to town. It's just amazing. It's just amazing how powerful music really is. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's you're talking about. I think it's also I think you started to say it, or maybe I thought you were going here. It's like people. I don't know people who passively like Centro-matic.
Yeah,
people love it.
That's true.
Like,
you're right.
If you're a fan of it, you really, really like it.
Yeah.
And that's cool too. And I love bands like that.
Part of it is that you're committing to something, so that like when Will is singing. Again, this actually goes back to John Freeman. When Will is singing, he's really not trying to sing so that you will like it. He's just trying to find something in himself that he is very happy with. Mm-hmm. And so there are things about Will's voice that are off-putting to lots of people. And the voice is hugely important to listeners of most music, especially when you hear the music for the first time. So it actually self-selects for people that are going to love us, because you're rejecting some of that most broad appeal, and you're choosing for a more. I mean, I don't want to say that it's a deeper thing. I don't want to put a judgment on it. Just to say that the people that find that they love our music, they love it more ferociously than people that like something that. I don't even want to say that's easier to like, because I don't think Centro-matic is hard to like at all. But
yeah, there's something to it. It gets played still at the bar at Dan's, or it did when I was hanging out there a lot. And I remember listening to it in a very noisy place. You couldn't always understand the words. And I remember someone remarking to me about it, like, I can't really. And I was like, that might be. There's a part of it that is like, put on headphones. Mm-hmm. It's like drawing you in. You're kind of, and I think and I like weird voices. I like when it gets down to it, someone goes, "Well, who are your favorite singers?" And I'll list off 5, and they'll be like, "That's a pretty weird list, dude." And I'm like, "I know, yeah, that is weird." Like I got a thing against good voices or something,
Yeah.
But I like those, those because to me they're drawing you in and going on the face. It's like. It's not, the beauty is not apparent,
right?
But you might, you get in a little closer and you're like, what is this guy saying? What is happening right here? And you have, as a producer of that, have a certain job of like delivering that in a certain way and presenting it, in a certain way. What's it like to have people come to you then and go, I want this sound? That is very, that I don't know, kind of you guys as a group have ownership of, and someone.
I see what you're saying. I thought you meant when somebody comes in and says like, "I want to sound like this," and you know that they're not capable of it.
Yeah, well, there's that too. I mean,
that's say like, "I love Centro-matic. Make me sound like Centro-matic."
Yeah.
You just try your best, and they will discover through the recording process. Here's what you want to do with a recording. You immediately try to open somebody up to what is actually happening and not what's in their mind. It's the number one most important thing about recording yourself, is you cannot be attached to the fantasy. Not I want to call it a fantasy, but the imagined. Your imagination is far better than anything you will ever record. So you have to just get people to understand they need to become open and available to the great things that are already happening and not focusing on the thing that they're not quite achieving that's in their imagination. So you do that in lots of different ways. You just tell them, very honestly, I will just tell people that. I mean, you just have that conversation,
Can you... Oh man, because we're like, to go back to you, to you wanting this drum sound. Someone said, I'm not going to be able to do that. You came to me because I can do this, and this is, like, is there a part of you now that almost has to explain this to people because you have experienced it, of like, you came to me for a reason. You hear something in me that you identify with. I need your trust. I need you to be open to like what I can do.
Yep.
And I'm going to come as close to what you want as I can get, knowing I know I'm never going to get there. You need to accept that I'm never going to get there.
Right.
And hopefully here in the middle, we're going to both decide that we like it.
Right.
And that we're proud of it.
Right.
Continue. I'm sorry.
That is a thing that I will say. Also, I sometimes know that this is just a step in their life, in their search for trying to find this, and that they will learn something from this process, even if I'm not able to, to magically read their mind and get inside of it. Also, to say this, my technique, like generally, I mean, a thing that I want to do at all is to try to be able to not be everything to everyone, but to be able to really, if somebody wants to do something very different from what we're doing, to make it not impossible to try to do that. So, for instance, in Adam's Farm, I had recorded with somebody who's a very good engineer, but their process was very cut and dried. It was like you come in, you show up. Probably I was even possibly had to play the drums that were in the studio at that time, not even my drum set possibly. Maybe we swapped the snare drum out. And then you could just see like, oh, they were all labeled. These labels had not been changed on this console ever. It was like, this is the setup. The idea of using a different microphone was really not on the table. And it wasn't because this person wasn't a lovely, incredible person and a great engineer, truly. It was because we were trying to record at this pace that it really didn't allow. You couldn't go up and in 3 days record your album if you wanted to experiment and discover this sound that was in your imagination. Just not possible. So I have the luxury now of working on records where we almost always do have time to explore, to try to find that thing. And you can, I want somebody to be able to say, I love this. I'm going to play you some things. and these are very rudimentary, very basic sounds. I actually want this, and I would like to think that I would in good faith try to get that. This is more self-selection, but in reality, every single band has a computer. Every single band has microphones. Every single band can record themselves and does. So the bands that truly want to be lo-fi, they don't often come to me, and the bands that respond to the recordings I've made, those are the ones that come to me. So we were back when I had less than great experiences. It's because we didn't have somebody to record us. We were just looking for someone to record us. So it was a little bit trial and error of being matched up with the wrong people sometimes,
Yeah.
Although I will say every person that I've recorded with, they all were good, really, truly. Like there were no major missteps. It was just that sometimes it was a mismatch, even though they were good and, we were a good band.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a really good experience to have to. And then what did I do? I went and became a recording engineer in order to solve that thing that was in my brain. But what's best? So that may be the best thing for an artist is to continue pushing and pushing and pushing until you find the thing that's in your mind. But for the album you're trying to make right now, you got to be available. You got to really be open to what's available. The reality is you're always being open to what's available if you're a good artist. I mean, that's what I said about Ian and I recording in the bedroom. It's still true. That's what we were doing. We were listening back to what we did. We were changing something. We just used the tools that were at our disposal. Mm-hmm. So that's just what everybody is doing. And when you bring a group of people into the studio, those are the tools that are at your disposal, and you just are open to those things. But it can be hard it can be hard to explain to somebody what the limitations are of the studio, and to kind of, sometimes the problem, I'm sorry to keep going on about this, but sometimes
I love this.
The problem with a person having something in their imagination is that a strong sense of what that's supposed to be is that it does make them unavailable for what really cool thing is happening that's not quite that thing. Mm-hmm. And that's a bummer, because oftentimes you're playing music with people and there's all this beautiful stuff happening, but it's not what you expected. And usually, if you're more of sometimes a person that's even more of an auteur, or somebody who's just more very specific with their desires, that person cannot identify, he cannot be open, or she cannot be open to the things that are really going on. And it's not that what's really going on is better than what's in their mind. It's just that what's in your mind is not going to happen in the next week. Mm-hmm. And what's happening here is going to happen if they would become available to it. Then that's its own skill. It's like a really good musician sitting down in front of an instrument that they're not familiar with. And what do they do? If you're not a very capable musician, or you're not very musical, I should say, you will just continue doing it the way you've always done it. And you will notice that if it's drums, you will notice that the fills don't sound good anymore, the cymbals sound weird, but you won't change anything. If you're very musical, or you're a good musician, you will instantly change what you're doing to reflect and enhance the sound of the instrument you're playing on. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the true joys of recording people that are very musical. You can just literally put down like a 2x4 and just, whatever, and just and pencils, and they will figure out how to make that into a cool drum sound. You know? They will just change everything they're doing. If you set them down in front of a giant instrument that just rings constantly, they'll only play 3 or 4 notes and let each one of them just ring out into space, because they know that's the tool they're using. They won't continue to play their very complicated part on this instrument that won't sustain it.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the great things about recording somebody that's just very musical, and somebody who's just open to what's happening. It's really cool.
You'll get asked to do stuff where people will come in and say, I want you to record this and drum on it, and you do a fair amount of that, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have a preference as like a performer or an engineer?
Oh, to do one or the other?
Yeah.
It just depends on the album, because oftentimes it's great to be like the coach on the field, and you want to play drums. I want to play drums because it's easier to conceive of what a different tempo would be or a different style would be if I'm just sitting at the drum set. When there's, when as we're coming up with parts, I just start playing the new style, and then maybe somebody else starts responding to me, and we don't even have to talk about it. Just suddenly we're playing a different version of the song, or I change the tempo and everybody plays along with that, and suddenly we don't even have to discuss it. It just is the new thing, and we're all kind of looking at each other and just, enjoying doing this thing, and it doesn't have to be. Whereas if I'm in the control room and I'm not playing, I have to convey with words all the things that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So it can be a real shortcut. On the other hand, there are times for sure when you can't really do a thing and observe the thing at the same time. You're playing music where in the process of playing what I want to play, I cannot fully notice what's happening with every other musician.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, nobody can listen to a piece of music and actually, not nobody, very few people can actually fully pay attention to 5 different things at once. Mm-hmm. You just have to shift your focus. You're just shifting your focus from different sections. Something jumps out at you, you pay attention to it, all that kind of stuff. There are only a few humans in the world that have been documented to have that. I don't remember what it's called, but there's like a piano player that can... he can have 4 different symphonies in his mind at the same time. They can be playing at the same moment, and you can stop at the 3-minute and 13-second mark, and he can tell you which notes are being played in each of the 4 symphonies. I mean, you could do that at any point. I mean, that's an unbelievable skill, and most humans do not have that. Most of us are just... like multitasking almost doesn't exist at all in human brains, period. So we're all just focusing, shifting our focus quickly, and then it feels like we're multitasking.
Right. I call myself a multitasker, but what I do is focus on something while I'm doing something that I don't care to focus on.
Yeah, that's right.
But I do that constantly.
Yeah.
Is there, I don't know. I guess I'm like, I as a performer, I know, to me, there's so much gratification that comes out of performing, and I love it. And I've basically identified myself as that. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy performing in a studio, but I've just never geared all my attention toward that. I'm a live performer, and I like what comes along with that. I like the just whatever, come in, do a thing, and it's interesting to talk to people who don't, or to interact with people who don't understand it as well, and where they might go, oh, it didn't go that great, and I'm like, yeah, it didn't, and I'm like, who gives a shit? It's like, tomorrow will be fine.
Yeah.
Or, and they can't all be winners.
And it was fine, even though it wasn't as good.
Right.
The process still, sometimes it's painful and not fun, but usually, even when it's not going well, it's still really interesting to me and fun to, I just get something from it.
Same.
But there are people for whom it's just painful, And
then the studio thing is so focused, and everyone is, and I like that too. I do. I like, and I've enjoyed working with you in that when we can get super specific. And so, hey man, this thing, it's not working. Try something else. And it's cool to like have that, be creating art in a moment, and then have someone stop you in that moment and go, right here, let's work,
right.
And then we'll carry on. And it's a beautiful thing. And you like finding balance between those things? Is that kind of what your life is?
Yeah, for sure. Being in the studio is what you're talking about is craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. What you do in the studio is you're crafting a song. Sometimes you're just documenting, but usually you're crafting it. And that's really fun. And that's very collaborative, which I love. I love that about the studio.
Yep.
That we're all a lot of times we're all weighing in on we're all focusing our collective attention on each thing, and then figuring out what to do to solve a puzzle. And I love that. I do love solving the puzzle. Why is this not working? What is it? And we can agree, right? The 4 or 5 of us that are in this room, right? We don't like this moment, right? And then, and then you're just narrowing it down and figuring out.
Problem solving.
When you solve the problem, it just feels so good. I get so much out of that.
It does.
Obviously, I also get a huge thing out of performing, because I ran into a thing when I was, as Centro-matic was wrapping up. Now, we had not said anything to each other, but I knew that we were we were not as busy. The writing was on the wall. I could tell we were at the end of our career, and that was a very painful, hard time. And I drifted into a real depression, like a real midlife crisis or whatever you call it, and I was really struggling. I was like, had even tried some antidepressants. They didn't really work for me, just trying to figure some stuff out. Everything about my life is great. Why don't I feel that way? What is wrong here? Over the course of my career in Centro-matic, I stopped, because I devoted all of my extra attention to the studio. I stopped woodshedding. I stopped practicing on my own. And that's still true. I mean, I don't actually play the drums very often. It's bad. It's shameful. I wish that I could and did play drums more than I do. But it was really true. It was happening. It was definitely true at that time. And I got asked by David Pierce to do Cirque du Horror. So that's a Halloween show that David Pierce puts on. It's like musical theater. It is jazz music, but it's not exactly. It's a little bit vaudeville, a little bit big bandish, and it really was fun. But it required reading, for one thing, which I had not done in 20 years. Mm-hmm. I was 20 years out of school when this happened, because I quit school and did not read a note of music at the age of 20. Or maybe 21, so whatever.
Yeah.
This was actually not quite 20 years. It would have been more like 17 years or something. But it was a long time. So it was quite hard to go back in and woodshed to do this it was not beyond me technically, but it was in preparation for doing it. I, of course, wanted to shake off some rust, but man, it was really like a lot to go back in and kind of refresh myself on reading. But it totally brought me out of my funk. I stopped being depressed in just the 2 weeks of preparation I put into doing this gig. It was so amazing, and it just showed me why is this so amazing? Why is this so effective? It's because when you're playing complicated music and you're woodshedding, you're devoting all of your focus to this thing, you fall into a flow state that you cannot fall into in your normal everyday life. When there is enough time and attention for you to become distracted and think of other things, you will not be in a flow state. Flow state only happens when you're forced to really focus. And that's what was happening. Because I wasn't just reading through this stuff. I was also, let me loosen up and try this experimental thing. And then I would fall into that for 30 minutes of just working on some technical thing. And I was just the depression just floated away. And it really helped me. And it's what made me realize, okay, as Centro-matic wraps up, I have to continue playing music. I cannot ever stop playing music. I must play music live. I just can't do anything else. I've got to continue playing. Because I felt this. I was noticing, sure, I play on people's records when they hire me to make their records and they want me to play on them, but it's hard to get onto the stage, and actually it's very difficult to jump from band to band, especially the longer you've been doing it. It's like, your peer group is not trying to make new bands anymore.
Right.
It's really hard. So I knew it was going to be difficult, and I was very fortunate then. The way that my career ended up playing out, it worked out great, and I've been very fortunate and super happy to be able to, probably that's Julie. It is Julie. Super happy to be able to continue playing music live on stage. It's a really unique thing, and I'm very grateful for it. But I worked really hard ever since that moment. I've worked really hard to put myself in a position to be asked to be on stage. And that comes right back to the high school thing of like going out and being around other people, making sure that they notice you, just infiltrating a new peer group every 7 years or something. And that relates to music too. You're in a group, but that group is going to age out of even making music.
Yeah.
There are not very many people that I started making music with that are still making music. And if they are, they're just doing it themselves in their bedroom. They're not forming bands and playing that music live,
Yeah.
So I've had to just continually jump back and work with younger and younger people each time. And luckily I've been able to make the leap each time, but it's not easy,
Well, and I think you seem to be in demand. I think because you have people who do, these people might have grown up admiring your work.
Sure.
It's a different thing.
Exactly.
And then they go like for Shakey Graves to go like, oh, we could have, maybe Matt would be interested in this. And then you get to like, I don't know. I know you guys play big places and stuff. And that's like, I think that's a cool thing that you're not like, I don't know. You're not getting smaller in that regard, and you're not just,
No.
I think that's a really cool thing that because you continue to grow, and I know what you mean about woodshedding, but I think there's also something that comes along with being a little bit older where you just know the choices to make.
Oh, for sure.
The last conversation we had before I texted you about this was I saw Shakey Graves, and I was like, your stage volume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I do this.
And that would never, in a million years, when I was younger, I played so loud.
Right.
So loud.
And again, that was what drew me to you.
Yeah.
But I'm in a different place now too.
Right.
And I think that's like a cool thing about good musicians. There's a few drummers. I mean, luckily with like you or Earl Harvin or, people who I see, and every time I see them, I take something else away that I'm, if it's an approach thing. And so I think that last time I saw you, it was like, that's it. No longer is anyone going to be like, kind of wince at me on stage.
Totally.
Because of my volume.
Yeah.
It is always, and everything I do, every choice I make is like darker, softer.
Oh, for sure.
Everything's, and I love it. And I love I love what it does to my ears, and I see it in other people. And when you're playing with someone who is really loud and you're not the loud one, it's like, yeah, what's he doing over there? But I know I've been that guy.
Oh, you're the king of the other thing. You're the king of like perfect, being exactly restrained enough to set the table for everybody else in the band. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, I've actually thought your stage volume and the way that you integrate into a band, I've admired that for 20 years. I mean, as long as I've ever seen you play music, it's always been a part of your playing in a really cool way.
Okay.
I actually think the cart is like the relationship is the opposite.
Okay.
I started playing quieter, partially noticing that how effective it was, that you weren't, when you would play, especially with RTB2, it's not a thing that was like, oh, that was lame and that wasn't powerful enough because it wasn't loud enough. I would actually notice that you would play this very aggressive, amazing, and powerful music, and you weren't actually playing that hard, It was not, you were literally not like putting it wasn't like, it just, the sheer volume of it wasn't overwhelming.
There's always been some economy of movement.
Exactly
with me.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah.
But, and then a big part of that, when you only have two people, is like, we got to make the big really big, and we got to make the small really small.
Sure.
And then probably also you're just writing a midline that's like, we have to make it seem big and we have to make it seem small without ever, affecting the dynamics way too much, because, I mean, and that goes into recording too. You're like, if you play this way too softly, it's never going to get on the tape. If you play it way too loudly, you're never going to be able to capture it. So you're we have like a built-in compressor, going in.
For
sure. But yeah, that's a cool thing. I also think, working at some point with you, there was something of like, you don't really have to, just smash it to make it sound big. And I think we had a discussion about the snare drum.
Yeah.
That was like, really, if you just hit it right in the middle and let the stick bounce off, it sounds big.
Yep.
And like, if you really slam it, some other sound happens, and maybe a bit of that sound we don't want, and all the machines are going to go, kind of
when
freak
you're
out.
recording, there's a way, especially if you're using compression and other techniques, there just is something where you need to be in a certain range in order to achieve, the thing that we've agreed we're going to do. You have to agree with the musician. Okay, so if they're playing at a certain volume, you're just like, well, I obviously can't compress it that much because their cymbals are going to be too loud and it's going to be a mess. And once they get into that range, you just want to be in that range. And that's something that really can't happen live. You really have to, because what you're doing there, you're making a trade-off between the sound, the equipment having an exciting component to it, which would be compression and room tone. And that's providing a lot of excitement instead of just the musician providing all the excitement by playing at a certain way. And when you play live, you just don't have the same luxury. You have to sometimes create that excitement without the benefit of extra compression and certainly without the sound of a specific of reflections coming back into a room.
Yeah.
And using reverb is not the same. There is it's not remotely the same to put reverb onto something as it is to be playing in a room, have the reflections come back into the microphone and then way over compress it. And then you're hearing the attack of the drum first, then the drum is getting quieter and the reflections are flooding into the microphone. There's just an excitement to that will never happen by just using reverb.
Yeah.
So it's not really available to you because there are no walls on the stage. It's not available to you live to do that.
Yeah.
Plus, you got a whole other band that's making a lot of noise in front of the person. So the live sound guy is just restrained and constrained in a way that, you're not constrained in the studio. So sometimes to play devil's advocate, sometimes you have to do a little stage work or be exciting by either playing a little bit harder or seeming like you're playing harder, but not actually doing it. And that gets a little bit performative sometimes, and I don't always love that. I don't love watching a drummer or a musician who seems like they're really hamming it up and it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like they're really doing that. But I definitely I definitely want to convey excitement. And so I will admit there's a little stagecraft or whatever you want to call it in playing live and making it exciting for people.
If you're not thinking about it, or at least acknowledging it on some level, then you're like kind of shooting yourself in the foot as a performer.
Yeah.
You must consider how it looks because, people talk about how you eat first with your eyes, but I think people listen with their eyes first too.
For sure.
And so if you walk up and something looks like shit, then you're going to be predisposed to think it sounds like shit. And, but you see, I don't know, if you're looking at a stage and you see people who look cool, doing things who look cool, they
look like they're into it. They just look like they're transfixed by the process. That's, I think, the most important thing is that the audience can tell that you are really engaged in it, and they feed off of that. And it's hard. I never want to be checked out when I'm playing music. It's the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah.
So I also, it's a little bit like the power of positive thinking of possibly faking it a little bit until you can until you also fall into the moment, like remembering to be engaged. Honestly, that's part of it.
Yeah. I do that a bit too. Mostly it's, I do a lot of gigs that are long and we're just kind of, maybe people are incidentally there. So I do a lot of like trying to engage people by being like, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And like, this guy is taking a solo and I'm watching him and it genuinely does bring me joy, but I allow that to kind of show on my face. And then I hope I'm sort of informing people of, oh, look there, or like what is going on here? These and maybe you can sort of direct it that way a little bit. Man, this is a blast. We should probably cut off. I know you got I only have you for a couple hours.
My ride is almost here.
Okay. Well, this has been great. This has been a blast. I would love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, I had a great time anytime.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Grady.